Hello and welcome to another episode of the Delivering Sports Show. I'm your host, Spencer Ostrowski. Well, the dust of free agency has settled and team intentions have become more clear now. So I think it's worth revisiting regarding every team in the lottery and regrading them and taking a look at the drafts as a whole. First up was Arizona. With their first ever number one pick in the NBA draft, they selected big man DeAndre Ayton. Phoenix's current roster for centers are Alex Len, Dragon Bender, and Tyson Chandler. Well, actually, it was reported a few days ago that Alex Len's rights were announced yesterday, meaning he will be a free agent, which is really sad considering they spent a fifth pick on him in the 2013 draft. Not only that, but they seem to be moving on from Dragon Bender with the pick they spent, they spent the fourth pick on him just 2 years ago. I think it was purely reactionary to Kristaps Porzingis and chasing some sort of ghost or archetype with Dragon Bender. So, just 2 years after they found, they thought they found their true big man. But DeAndre Ayton is undeniably talented and dominant, and his comparisons are to that of Shaq and David Robinson. The only problem I have with this pick is, in particular, is that Luka Doncic's fit with this team would have been, a lot better. Dragon Bender surely would have been more comfortable playing with a fellow European, and Devin Booker would have been, getting great looks off ball, which is really, the core of the system in Phoenix, right? Devin Booker. The organization is hyping this pick up to be the next Shaq and Kobe combo, which again is chasing some sort of ghost for me. I'm not a big fan of. Of course, DeAndre Ayton should still be really talented, so the pick is it's not a bust to me, but. Just perhaps they're taking one step back instead of taking two steps forward, really. The next pick for Phoenix came in a trade for Mikal Bridges. I have mixed thoughts about this pick. In terms of the player they're getting, they received a great 3-and-D player for their team that can contribute right away for basically any team in the NBA, that kind of skill set. The problem with this trade is that the Suns come in for two major reasons. The first reason is they gave up one of the most valuable assets of the NBA, which is the Miami Heat's unprotected 2021 pick. If the Heat's projected progress stays on track, this could easily be a top 3 pick. And I'm not sure that's worth Mikal Bridges. And now that they got Trevor Ariza, this makes even less sense. So basically, it solidifies that Mikal is going to play off the bench. The second major problem with this pick is the way he fits with his team. Unless Devin Booker runs the point guard position, which I think is a really bad decision, Mikal has no place in the starting lineup. Right now, they basically have insert, point guard here kind of thing. Devin Booker, Josh Jackson, Marquise Chris, or Trevor Ariza, however they want to go with that, and DeAndre Jordan. I really don't see Josh Jackson moving to the 4, Mikal playing the 3 if they want to go that way. Since both of those guys don't really have the size or strength needed, to guard and rebound from that position. And it's also is not Mikal's an 18 or 19-year-old who would benefit from learning off the bench. He's 22 years old and the most NBA-ready player in this entire draft. So good on the Suns for picking up a solid player, but I'm just not sure of the value he brings to this team in terms of the current roster and the cost that they gave him up. They gave up for him. Also at 31st overall, they selected Elliot Okobo. I'm actually a pretty big fan of this pick. The Suns passed up on better, more talent than this guy. His strengths are the pick and roll game and his passing ability. These are two important things that go along, with DeAndre Ayton and distributing the balls to the shooters that they have. And finally, the Suns took George King with the 59th pick. This, of course, was just an extremely low-risk pick that hopefully won't matter if he makes it to the start of this season. George King was a 4-year player out of Colorado whose strengths are shot making. He has a lot of questions about a defensive first step and passing, and he was drafted by the team purely for his shot making ability. Again, it's not significant in the grand scheme of things, and overall, I give the Suns a B for their draft. Next up was the Sacramento Kings. They selected Marvin Bagley with the 2nd overall pick, so. He's an extremely gifted offensive player and then a tenacious rebounder and even shot 40% from 3 in college. That being said, I think there are major red flags with him, especially being the 2nd overall pick. First of all, the idea that he shoots 40% from 3 is very misleading. If you look at his per 40 stats, he is less than 1 3 made per game with that. And I'm not a big advanced stats guy at all. I use them to look at the bad things, like versus like on that like pop out on a page, because I don't believe inflating someone's stats is gonna easily like fold out if you just give a player more minutes, because that's not how real life goes. However, if you inflate someone's stats and you see a stat cutter that is still bad, that is when you can see something alarming about a player. Speaking of alarming per 40 stats, Bagley averages 1 block per game per 40. He's an extreme liability on defense, to the point that Duke was forced to switch to a zone to attempt to cover up his defensive shortcomings. As it stands, you can't play him in the last 5 minutes of a game, which is not something you want to, like, out of the second overall pick in the draft. The Kings had one other pick in this draft, ended up taking Gary Trent Jr., who they traded the Portland Trailblazers, which isn't the worst move on their part, considering they don't need a point guard, and it's stacked up like their future assets. I give the Kings like a B- for this draft, just with all that in mind, especially with the second overall pick in the draft. The third overall pick is where things got really interesting. The Hawks selected Luka Doncic on the grounds that the Dallas would select Trae Young. Dallas also sent a first-round selection for the next year's to Atlanta for this as a top 5 protected. For me, this is another move that's taking one step back, kind of. I know they want to trade Dennis Schroeder, but they have no obligation to do so, really. Outside of power forward, since they selected Zach Collins last year, every position was in need for this team, and they selected like basically the position they don't even need. I believe they would have benefited greatly by trading back or taking Mo Bamba to continue to build towards something. I do commend them for picking up a valuable pick from next year's draft, as well as getting a talented player in this year's draft. Trae Young certainly has the skill set to be the most talented and exciting player in the draft. His shooting and passing abilities are very easily translatable to the NBA. The only thing you worry about Trae Young is his small size and defensive first step, but as we know with Steph Curry, it is quite easy to hide a point guard on a good defensive team. More than anything, this pick was a business move, considering Atlanta had the lowest attendance in the NBA last year, and Trae brings them the biggest interest of a prospect in this year's draft, since he led the country in points and assists last year. At 19th overall pick, the Hawks selected Kevin Huerter. I can definitely respect this pick. The Hawks are definitely trying to build Golden State archetype, with Steph obviously being Trae Young, and now they hope Kevin can be their Klay Thompson. Huerter's a good shooter and defender, which is almost a one-for-one scouting report, for Klay, the way Klay Thompson plays. Again, I'm not a fan of chasing ghosts, but at the very least, I can respect building towards a culture that you want for the future, rather than simply accumulating like random talent. With this in mind, it should come to no surprise that Atlanta selected Spellman to be their Draymond Green. His main strengths are his his ability to stretch on the floor, and his ability to guard on the perimeter, and most important, he brings a lot of energy to the floor and like kind of that trash talk type of thing that Draymond's like known for. I'm going to give the Atlanta Hawks a B+. I'm glad they drafted towards an archetype. I'm just not a fan of trying to recreate something one for one. Good for them for getting a valuable pick, though, in the next year in the process to help build, to continue to build, because obviously they're not going to be ready anytime soon for, a playoff push or anything like that. At the 4th overall pick, the Grizzlies selected Jaren Jackson Jr. The crazy thing about the selection, of course, is that he was dead set on not being selected by the Memphis Grizzlies just a day before. I would give this... He wouldn't give over his medical forms, and he requested not to be selected by them. And now it came out on the day of the draft that JB Bickerstaff talked him and convinced him to basically do a full 180. I mean, that's remarkable. Jaren Jackson, he fits really well for this team in a draft that Wallace dedicated to bringing back the grit and grind archetype. Jaren Jackson, he's an elite shot blocker and even shot 40% from the 3 in college, making him an extremely valuable asset for this team, who is looking to, clear up room in the paint and on the offensive side of the ball, since he can stretch it so well. I like to think of him as one of the true Anthony Davis archetypes of the new era of basketball. I don't believe he's necessarily will ever reach this potential of being a Anthony Davis, but the skill sets are very, very similar. He's also the youngest player in the draft. When he turns 21, he will have been in the league for 3 years, which is incredible. At the 32nd pick, the Grizzlies selected point guard Javon Carter. An important pick for the Grizzlies since they passed up on like the likes of Jalen Brunson. They went into the draft with an exact plan in mind and they stuck with it. With Carter, the Grizzlies are going to get a multi-defensive player of the year and an all-around solid player for all aspects of his game. The problem, of course, is that he was a 4-year player and the ceiling might not be as much higher as it is when he enters the league. Since he's a second-round pick, it's a perfect spot to take him. Especially since it's exactly the grit and grind type of point guard they were looking for. So I give the Grizzlies an A- for their draft. Yeah, so next up was Dallas, of course, who acquired Luka Doncic for that trade. It goes without saying that Luka Doncic is one of the best, prospects in the draft, if not the best prospect in the draft. He was the best player in all of Europe, and he played in the league in his levels above college at the age of 18 years old. He's a proven winner and all-around great player. His versatility is going, is going to fit well with basically any team in the NBA. The only gripes you have with Luka Doncic is that I don't believe he's ever going to be a number one scoring option. The NBA is going to be a lot faster than in Euroball, and he's not going to be able to score so easily. This is a minimal gripe, considering that he plays on a team that he doesn't need to be the number one scoring option since Dennis Smith is a ball dominant scorer. So the two complement each other quite well actually. And the pick looks even better now that they have DeAndre Jordan. Which was a big question mark after the draft since they gave up the pick. It's whether or not they could bring in a big free agent center. Since they haven't been able to do it for years and years, especially after the DeAndre Jordan situation which just happened where he verbally agreed and left. The only concern is DeAndre Jordan's getting older and you can't be certain he's going to continue to be as productive as he was before, especially since his athleticism is the strongest part of his game. Magically the Mavericks got him on a 1-year deal so they can get rid of him next offseason if they want. There is a risk with overpaying him in the next year if he plays really well. There's that part to worry about as well. And you'd have him for a long-term deal and to the point where he would just be useless and taking up a lot of cap space. But the fact that they got him for 1 year now, then they can worry about that next season. It's going to be very beneficial for the team. The Mavericks also drafted Jalen Brunson in the second round. This pick was a bit strange to me. I think Brunson is a really good all-around solid player, but it doesn't make sense considering that they actually seem like they want to keep Yogi Ferrell on that kind of guard position. I think this was more of a panic best available pick. I think they thought he wouldn't be there, and it creates a bit of a logjam at the guard position when they have a lot of positions that need an upgrade outside of it. At the very least, you can appreciate picking up someone like that in the second round who's a really solid contributor to the team. And ultimately, as it looks right now in terms of getting their guy and getting DeAndre Jordan after it's all said and done, I give him an A+ for this draft. So after this, we have the Orlando Magic. They selected Mo Bamba. I get the appeal to Mo Bamba. He has the size and athleticism of Giannis Antetokounmpo and seemingly an actual shooting ability as well. The problem I have with it is his team fit. This is the same conundrum the Kings have found themselves in for the past forever. They clicked a bunch of guys with talent with no direction. I couldn't tell you right now what their team culture is. If they want this to be their base, I guess it's Jonathan Isaac, Aaron Gordon, and Mo Bamba. But I'm not sure what that is or how it works. I really think they're going to go and bring in Isaiah Thomas. I'm going to laugh because this team just doesn't seem to know what they're doing. The team was built up with Dwight Howard, and they haven't done anything since he left. It's got to be a frustrating time for an Orlando fan because I don't all these guys. Jonathan Isaac, Aaron Gordon, Mo Bamba. These are all guys who are developing their offensive games. But they're all doing it at the same time. And you don't really have a team culture or a way you play the game, it's not good for teams to have the same idea of just be we're just going to go out there and we're going to play basketball. And we're going to try to play basketball well. It doesn't really work like that. You have to, it's more than that. Golden State has their perimeter-centric, passing the ball all the time, Same thing with San Antonio. Like, they're going to get a lot of ball movement in, not necessarily three-pointers, but they're going to move the ball till they get the right shot. Memphis has the grit and grind type of thing, They have the way they play basketball, and it's proven to be very successful. With Orlando, you're not getting that at all. You're just getting a bunch of mumbo-jumbo players, and not to say that the core they have now is bad. Well, I mean, especially the verdict's out for Jonathan Isaac, who looked terrible last year. I'm just saying, like, it doesn't look good right now. Like, you can't just have a bunch of talented players. They have to know where they're going. If they don't have goals, they can't achieve them. So I give them a C+ for this draft. They got a good guy, but I just don't know what they're going to do with him. Next up is the Chicago Bulls. Please don't kill me, but I think the Bulls actually had a really great draft. In fact, I would say they had one of the best drafts of 2018. You can't get Kevin Durant or LeBron James or Steph Curry every draft. You can't get Kevin Durant or LeBron James or Steph Curry every draft. Sometimes it's okay just to get guys who be solid contributors to your team, and this is exactly what the Bulls got in Wendell Carter and Chandler Hutchinson. This is especially important for a team that already has their young core of guys who they think they can lead the franchise. And Zach LaVine, which they can keep if they can keep him, which is very important. And Chris Dunn and Lauri Markkanen. It is crazy to think these guys are going to get like some real help by these guys and free up and develop their already young guys who are like really good. Wendell Carter is like especially helpful for Lauri since he takes the pressure off him defensively. On both the blocks area, protecting the rim and rebounding on both sides. It allows Lauri to focus on the best parts of his game, which is offense. And now this team, can reap the benefits next year of the Pelicans pick they got from the Mirotic trade. I mean, and now this looks even better in the grand scheme of things, since Michael Porter doesn't look like he's going to play in the next season, which a lot of people thought Chicago would take him at that spot. Because Chicago is ready to go now. Like, it's time to stop rebuilding. They have their guys, and now, especially if they got two solid guys, it's like they can make a legitimate playoff push and like help develop their guys and hopefully get them that playoff experience sooner rather than later. Because I think they have the guys they want to go forward. So I give them an A+ for the job. I think they did an awesome job of getting guys who are just going to help their franchise move forward. With the number 8 pick, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Colin Sexton. A lot of people are going to say this pick was to appease LeBron and try to get him to stay. I'm not buying this. I think Dan Gilbert knew that LeBron was never going to come back to the Cavs. LeBron never even had a plan to have a meeting with the Cavaliers, so I think Gilbert made this pick because he really thought, Colin Sexton is going to be the future of the Cavs franchise, and this is an attempt to start the new era. They see him as like a Russell Westbrook type of player who surely, have the type of freedom, with their nightmare feel of a roster. They're not going to be able to make a lot of moves. Sexton is definitely going to have his say for a Rookie of the Year conversation since he's just going to have, the freedom to do whatever he wants with his team and make passes and shoot. I mean, there's no pressure on him, like on this team at all, to do anything. Personally, I would have liked it if they trade back with someone like the Clippers. So this team's desperate to like start, picking up picks and picking up younger talent and keep running through them like that. I can't recommend them too bad for the decision. They are getting a talented player, and I mean, really, this is the best spot for him since he's allowed to, really go wild in his rookie season, and he's going to need that development. He's going to go through those growing pains, and it's going to be at least 3 years before Cleveland can start building towards something else because they're going to have to get, rid of Tristan Thompson. They're going to have to get rid of George Hill. They're going to have to get rid of, JR and probably Lance. I'm assuming they're going to want to let go. I mean, he could maybe be a player that they see going forward. I also think they need to get rid of their love for Kevin Love. They said they wouldn't trade him, and I think it really hurt them in the draft. They could have moved up a spot to like maybe with Memphis to pick their guy if they wanted someone else. And basically, it's going to take them 3 years to build some sort of team. And by that time, Kevin Love's going to be 33 and not nearly as effective as he is now, which is not even really all that great. So I don't know why they feel so committed. I mean, maybe before is because they had some sort of hope for LeBron, and even then I doubt that. So I'm not really sure what their plan is with Kevin Love going forward. So I'm going to give him a B plus just because I think Colin Sexton was like a pretty good decision to take there, and it's a good landing spot for him in terms of team fit. So yeah, I'm going to give him a B plus, but it's just going to be a project for them, going forward. And I think everyone knows that, and obviously there's no pressure. So after that, the Knicks selected Kevin Knox, which is a slight shock to me since Michael Porter seemed to fall into the lap. In a situation the Knicks seems excited the possibility of happening. With Kevin Knox, they surely they went the safer route with the guy who's undoubtedly very talented. Knox is a great shooter who shows the potential to defend and drive to the rim at a high NBA level of basketball. On the other side of things, the Knicks aren't exactly in a rush to make the playoffs, so they are one of the teams that definitely could have afforded to take Michael Porter Jr. and let him take the year off without hurting their franchise. Although I can't knock him for, choosing a player that people are comparing to Paul George and Jason Tatum. So this is really a pick that we'll find out in a few years and whether or not this was a great decision or not. This is really more of one of the more mystery type of situations. You won't be like, yeah, they were good to pass up on him and get this solid contributor versus wow, they really passed up this guy because they're a little scared. They also selected Mitchell Robinson early in the second round. This is a guy who has to literally not play to organized basketball in a year. That's a pretty big red flag to me. You can practice every day all you want, but actually getting on that court is a completely different thing, especially when you're playing at a high level like college or Euro ball. He has a really high ceiling, but he also has a really low floor. And yeah, but it's in the second round, you can't think much of it. If it doesn't pan out, but Stolic's is really. It's going to be a project for sure. He's going to have a lot of growing pains, and hopefully you don't expect any contribution out of him in the first season because he's honestly not going to be ready. It would be incredible if he was. Going from high school basketball, taking not even just high school basketball to the league, which is proven already to be pretty bad for these guys and developmental wise, for the exception of LeBron James and stuff. But before when all these high school guys would come in, they just weren't. They were so young and not ready, but. Now he's going from high school to not playing organized basketball to the NBA. That's a huge leap and a huge gap in time of high-level basketball. So if he can spend maybe 1 or 2 years in the G League and he shows development, then they can start playing him. But if they expect anything from him this year, I think it's going to be a big problem. Especially because I think they should try to make the playoffs this year to try to attract the likes of Kyrie Irving, who thinks okay, if I add them, then we can make a real playoff push because – I'll be there, and they were already kind of in that playoff situation versus, being really bad, and he's just wow, if I come here, they're still going to be really bad, and we might be a fringe playoff team, and that's not exactly what I'm looking for. So that'll be an interesting, development to see as the season goes on. So for the next section, I'm gonna go over the 76ers draft, since that was McHale who was eventually traded to the Suns. I'm going to give the 76ers an A+ for this draft, even after LeBron signed with the Lakers. What most people don't understand is that, the title contention window closes so fast. You might only get one chance, every decade if you're lucky. By trading away McHale, they freed up max money at the chance of signing LeBron James. They had no choice but to make this decision. I promise you the 76ers would trade losing the conference finals and then, every year for the next 10 years over getting LeBron James once and winning one title. They ultimately didn't get him, but that doesn't matter to me. Even better, they got an extremely valuable asset in the Heat pick. And they ended up getting Zaire Smith, who's basically the guy they wanted in the first place. He's an athletic monster. So they got the guy they wanted in a valuable pick, and they also left the chance open for them to get LeBron James, which was the most important part. So again, they got an A+, and I can't express this enough, even if it didn't turn out exactly the way they wanted. So the Charlotte Hornets selected Shea Gilligan's Alexander. Although they eventually landed their guy Miles Bridges with the next pick. They made that trade to the Clippers for 2 second-round picks. I like the decision they made, and it was a bit of a power move considering the Clippers, banking on the Clippers really wanting this guy enough to trade for him, Shea. Because I think Miles was the guy they wanted all along, so... But the only problem is I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do with Miles. Besides the fact that the Hornets are just awful at drafting players in the NBA over the past 5 years, or maybe even a little farther back. I mean, they just have a bunch of dudes with no like identity. This is another team without identity. You know, these teams need to realize sooner rather than later that they need to have and build a culture instead of just picking up talented guys. I mean, Frank Kaminsky's good, you know, and Nicholas Batum is good, and Kemba Walker is good, and all these guys are talented. But if they're not working towards some sort of common goal, like they're just going to be floating there, and they're all going to have their own like kind of direction that they're going because like Frank might have a different idea of what he wants his offense to be and what he wants his team to be than Kemba Walker, and that's a major problem for a team that has just been floating around nothingness for so long. You know, just for reference, the Charlotte Hornets have passed up on the likes of Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, C.J. McCollum, Steven Adams, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Saric, Zach LaVine, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, and have, or not anymore, have drafted, you know, still on their roster, Caldwell Pope, Michael K. Gilchrist, Cody Zeller, Noah Vonleh. You know, that's what they have to show for those drafts and passing up on those guys. And, excuse me. And the thing is like, yeah, you could probably go through every team like, oh, they should have picked this guy instead of this guy. But like, eventually, if you go through every team, you're like, okay, they got their guy, they got the right guy in this draft, and you know, everyone misses out every once in a while. I mean, over the past 5 years, I mean, they have really consistently missed, and especially last year. Not to say that Malik Monk's bad, but they had the choice between Donovan Mitchell and Malik Monk, and that was like their big decision, right? They wanted one of those two guys, and they had the chance, and they passed up on Donovan Mitchell, and that is just really, really important. That more than anything, just shows you like that they just are not very good at scouting at the very least. They've missed 5 years like in a row basically, so it's very disheartening. With that being said, for this draft, I'll give him a B. They picked up a talented player in Miles Bridges, who's extremely athletic, you know, has a very high ceiling, and he can contribute. I don't know what the fit is for this team. Next up was the Clippers back-to-back picks, kind of. You know, they made that trade. The no-brainer picks for me in this position were Lonnie Walker and Michael Porter Jr. You know, with Lonnie, you get the production here and now, and with Michael Porter, you get to wait and see what you get. Instead, they get an oversized point guard in Shea, he's not exactly good at anything except being big, and Jerome Robinson, who was never going to be taken this high at all, ever. Even though his stock went up, he was never going to be taken this high. It was never anyone's intention, I don't believe. You know, these guys may turn into solid role players, but they left so much on the table, as well as losing 2 second-round picks in the process. You know, I really don't get it. And now they have some sort of strange logjam thing going on at the guard position that they never really needed in the first place. You know, I give the Clippers a D for their draft. You know, even if their 2 picks pan out, you know, at some point you got to take on the risk, especially later in the lottery. Especially when a guy like Michael Porter's there, you know, taking him before, you know, might not have made sense for the Grizzlies because the risk was too high, and there's a lot of pressure to get someone who can actually contribute for sure. You know, but at the end of the lottery, like, who cares? You know, if you miss, you miss. But they had the chance to get a guy who was supposed to be a number 1 overall pick, and if he can stay relatively healthy, I mean, that's a huge, huge addition you get later in the lottery. And it really looks like these 2 guys they got, like, they might end up being nothing, you know, at all. Like, both of them. You're taking huge risk on both of them, but not even for the better, you know. So I give them a D. I wasn't a big fan. I was shocked that they didn't take Lonnie Walker or Michael Porter at the very least with one of those picks, not both of them. And the last pick in the lottery was Michael Porter Jr. This was the best spot, you know, pretty kind of to take him, basically. He goes to a team that doesn't need him to play next year at all. And if he pans out, they look really smart. And if he doesn't, then who cares? I mean, it's the 14th pick. This team doesn't need any more role players, you know. They didn't need a solid contributor, especially after locking up Will Barton. And they honestly got lucky to take the chance at 14th. You know, taking account the team fit, the risk at the spot, and the talent, it's an absolute A+, you know, move regardless of what happens to him because, you know, you can't have the regrets of him, like, if he ends up, like, just not playing because of his injury, like, it's totally worth the risk at this spot, like, and if it doesn't pan out, then who cares, you know? They have a team that's a playoff, you know, type of team right now. They don't need him. So if he ends up being good, I mean, it's just they look awesome taking this, and there's no pressure. This is good for Michael Porter too because there's no pressure on him anymore. You know, if he was taken 4th overall by the Grizzlies, there's major pressure for him not to stay healthy. You know, and be a big time guy like he was supposed to be originally. He was supposed to be the first overall pick before his vertebrae injury. So. Yeah, good on the Nuggets. I mean, they honestly got lucky that the Clippers goofed up so bad. So we'll see how it works out. So that does it for my video today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and thanks for watching.